I've been saving up for probably about 12 years now to buy one of these Cyclone Rakes, and they recently just had a real good sale on it, and I decided to call up and order one. So it delivered all in a little tiny FedEx truck. Came in 9 boxes. Most of them were manageable. The one with the blower and motor in it, though, did take 2 people to move. One of the boxes had been damaged during the delivery. There wasn't too much damage on it, just a little bit of scraped off powder coat and whatnot, but they did not do a really great job of packing the corners on these things, as you can see. So now it was time to move all of these boxes down into my shop and start assembly. There was one box that was labeled open first, so that's where I started. Open up this box, and inside there was a wall mounting kit that had come with it as part of the package deal that I bought. And then there was a another mounting bracket, a hitch bar bracket that came with it for mounting it to the tractor, and that had to be modified later. There was also a big elbow in there, and then there was a set of hitch forks that also was in there for mounting the front of the machine, and then a big elbow, which actually had some pretty big gouges in it from the way it was packed, and the hitch bars popped out the end and scratched it up. There also was a plastic bag in there that had the manual and a pair of safety glasses, it looked like. Safety glasses made out okay, but you can see the manual had some pretty big rips and tears in the front of it from where those hitch bars had poked through the box. The packaging on this whole thing was not really that great. So the first thing I wound up doing is opening up the big box with the frame, and then there were 2 boxes that came with the dual wheel casters that had to be assembled onto the frame. There was also a set of hitch bars that had to go on the front of that frame. Here you can see there were some more chips in the powder coat, and the finish actually was scraped off in some areas where the parts had rubbed together in the packaging. And many areas of the frame actually had the powder coat rubbed off or rubbed thin just due to rubbing around on the abrasive cardboard, I guess. So it was really a really crummy job they did of packing it for trying to keep the finish nice. I can see rust appearing in a lot of these spots over time just because the finish has been worn off like that. And there were just areas that were also missing powder coating. Seems to me like for what you pay for this thing, they could have done a little better job on the finishing of it and packaging of it. The first thing you have to do is mount 2 pivot brackets on the outside back of the frame, and that's a pretty straightforward job using all the hardware that's supplied. And it's just a matter of putting 2 bolts in and then tightening them up. All the nuts that they provided with this unit were lock-in type nuts with a nylon insert in them, so it seems like everything should stay together over time, even with vibrations or whatever it encounters. So after getting the first bracket on, then there's just another one that's identical to it that mounts on the other side. Next, each of the double wheel assemblies came with a bracket mounted in the box that must be mounted to the frame, and I made sure that I had the frame upside down laying on the cardboard that it was packed in, and I assembled the brackets to the frame as they showed in the manual. It was just a matter of 2 bolts and a nylon lock nut on each of the brackets, and then just going back and tightening them down. I went with the dual wheel kit upgrade on this, that they called it, because I have a lot of moist ground and whatnot, but I'm sure that the single wheel kit probably uses the same brackets and it mounts just in the same way. Once I had the bracket mounted, then I just had to pull the little clips off and slide the pins out because I actually had them facing in the wrong direction. And then it's just a matter of sliding the pins back in from the outside, and they retain the top plate on the wheel. And it's a really easy, simple retention method that makes the wheels quick and easy to remove later. And if the pins are facing in the right direction, you really only have to remove one of the pins to remove the wheels. Here you can see where there's some finish that's actually rubbed off of the wheel bracket from shipping too. And there's some nicks and chips in the powder coat on some of the other brackets also. So the handling and packaging of this was really not all that great. So once you get the one side done, then it's just a matter of repeating the same thing on the other side. Use the 2 bolts to mount the bracket, and then use the provided pins and clips to hold the wheels in place. And another thing I did right after this was I went back and I checked the air pressure in all the tires, and that was good. Now that I had the wheels on, I decided to take the frame and wheels and whatnot and just flip it over so that the top side was up so I could continue on with the assembly. And you could just assemble it right side up if you wanted to by setting the frame up on some boxes or whatnot, but I decided to do it upside down. So with it flipped over, the next thing to go on are the 2 front hitch brackets. And it's just a matter of putting a couple of bolts down through the frame with some washers on them, and all the bolts and washers and nuts are supplied, and they're pretty much mounted in the parts. And the one thing that I really didn't like about it was that it's a thin wall hollow tube that you are tightening these bolts and nuts up against, and it does have hundreds of pounds of force from the just the hitch on it and the motor on it and whatnot, but I guess I'll see how it stands up over time. They seem to be guaranteed, so I won't worry about it. As you can see, this is pretty much just a straightforward process. And if you have any problems or questions, you just look in the manual, and it had good pictures of exactly how everything goes together to help you out. And I'm looking forward to see what this 2-point hitch does to the handling on my little Kubota, and just see what it does to the handling, and with all the weight from the there's probably several hundred pounds that are going to be applied on the back of the tractor from the 10 horsepower motor, and then when you load the bag up with clippings, it's actually another 150 pounds. So I'm looking forward to see what happens. Next, I just took the front hitch plate. I really had no way to mount it to my tractor at this time, but I just put it in there in place to make sure that everything lined up. Now it was time to open the box with the bag, and this is the one that had the corner knocked off it. But as you can see there, the powder coat is all chopped up because when they put that green strap on, they put the sharp metal edges of it rubbing against the powder coat. And here you can see a little bit better how it's all nicked up there, and just another area where there'll probably be rust in the future. There's also some more nicks and damages and scratched off powder coat, and so the finish on it looks like it was good up until the point they put it in the box, and there you can see another thin spot in the powder coat where it's rubbed through. And then there was a spreader bar for the top that you had to remove, and you can kind of see here how the sticker was put on it. It was all folded over back against itself, all cockeyed and half peeling off because somebody did a sloppy job of installing that also. And basically everywhere you look, there were little nicks and dings in the powder coat where you know it's going to rust later. And now if I look in the manual, there was supposed to be some rubber bumpers that I just couldn't find there, so I wound up having to call Cyclone Rake, and they told me that they had moved them to the inside of the bag. So I had to open that up, crawl inside, and get the rest of the hardware, including those bumpers out that were supposed to be strapped on the outside. In the bag with the bumpers, if you look, it says if you reach page 13, the assembly manual. Well, it's too late because these things are packed inside and you have no idea. And there also was what looked to be like a toilet bowl cleaning brush inside there, and then a box that had a couple of extension brackets for the back of the frame. They seemed to be packed pretty well. So once I found the rubber bumpers, it was a simple matter. There were two holes in the front of the frame where you just place the bolts through, and then you have to just slip on the rubber bumper and put another locking nut in there, and then just tighten the assembly up. Be careful you don't tighten it too tight and pull that nut right down through. So it's pretty simple, straightforward process. Now, after getting the bumpers all tightened up in place, then the next thing you have to do is go back and put some extension brackets on the frame. Looks like they must use this frame for several different models, and so they didn't have to make a new frame. They just had some add-on brackets that they made up that widen out the frame in the back to allow the bigger bag of the Z10. And these brackets were pretty simple. You just had to remove the existing hardware that was holding the aluminum bag stiffeners, I guess they call them, in place. And then once you did that, you just have to go back and mount this bracket with the new hardware that they supply. And at the time that you're mounting the new bracket on, there's also a J hook that you have to mount on the bottom of the frame that hooks on those pivot points on the rear of the frame that you assembled earlier to allow the whole unit to pivot up without falling off. They give you all new hardware and new lock nuts for mounting these things, and there's that J bracket. So it's just a matter of inserting the hardware and then tightening everything up. I guess it looks like these brackets must have been added on at one time. I guess it's just to make the rear of the bag a little bit wider so it's easier to dump the grass clippings and debris and whatnot and have them come out of the bag without sticking or whatnot. And then once you get the bracket mounted in place with the two bolts and you have the J hook and you tighten everything up, then you just have to go back and take the hardware for mounting that pivot point for the aluminum tube and just mount that, stretch the tube out a little bit and just mount that back in place. And once you get this bracket mounted on the one side, then it's pretty much just a simple matter of flipping the bag assembly over and repeating the same thing on the other side, and then you've pretty much completed the assembly of all the parts on this Cyclone Rake. It would have really been nice had they put a little bit more thought into the handling and the packaging of all these parts so that there were not a lot of nicks and whatnot and damage to the powder coat finish, and you have spots that are going to rust in the future just because of this issue that could have really been avoided by some better handling and packaging. It's funny how I bought many items from Harbor Freight that come all the way from China, and the finish is actually in better condition on them than was on this Cyclone Rake. So let's see this. The first phase here that we have of all this assembly basically just took me a little bit over an hour, and that included, opening all the packages, unpacking everything, getting the tools together, and, just getting everything put together up to this point. So the basic assembly of it really does not take all that long, and it's pretty straightforward and simple and explained well in the manual. So once you get the bag assembled, it's just a matter of carrying it over and dropping those two J hooks on the pivot points on the rear of the frame, and that kind of locks it in place and allows it to pivot down on the frame. Then there's just a a strap on the bottom that's held in place with a little locking clip that you just take and you slip onto the pin on the frame, and that's what actually helps hold it in the dump position and keep there's a slider on there that you slide down to lock it in the dump position, and you just slide that up, and it allows the bag to go to the bagging position. And now it's just a matter of opening it up. Oh, here you can see another issue with the quality control on here. There are some round pins that are put on the end of this thing. You can see one of them is like kind of half burned off, it looks like, from welding or whatnot, where it should actually be round. So I'm hoping that won't chew up the tubing in the long run. But that's just the strap that the pins drop in 2 holes in the back, and that actually just stretches the back of the bag wide open to keep everything from collapsing. And you just have to drop the pins in the hole. Then there's a little metal bracket on the bottom and a thumb screw that tightens that into place to keep everything from closing up and slipping. Now with the basic assembly done on the unit, it's time to go over and open up the box that contains the motor and blower unit. Now this is a fairly heavy box that really you should have 2 people to lift, but I have to do it on my own because I have no help at this time. So the motor is packed with some nice foam inserts. They do give you a quart of 30 weight oil to go with the blower, so you have that for when you want to start up. And it is packed pretty well and in really good shape for the shipment. And there were a couple of other pieces that were laid in the bottom of the box also. There was a kit there with some latches and the cover for the blower inlet. And so let's see, I had to pick this out, and I have to tell you that this assembly actually turned out to be a lot heavier than I thought it would be. It's just marginal as being able to pick it up with one person. And there were a couple of other loose pieces that were laying in the bottom of the box. There was an exhaust pipe, and then there was a flange that was laying down there, and then there was a lock nut. Actually, there were 2 lock nuts that I found just laying there. So the next thing you have to do is just kind of roll this over to the front of the Cyclone Rake, and there are 2 holes in there that you bolt it down to the front with, so you have to basically just pick it up in place and then line these holes up. And there are a couple of mounting bolts that they provide with it that you just thread into place. There's one in the front there, and then there's also a second one that goes in the back side. I think in the future I'm going to have to make some kind of a better dolly for this thing to be able to take it apart and store it, because this engine is really just too heavy to lift up and move by yourself and get it into place. It really needs something to kind of pick it up and drop it in place. And once you have the motor sitting in place, there's just a couple of brackets that you have to put on, and there are actually a couple of tapered guides that go inside the chute opening that lock that top elbow on. I'm really surprised at just how little in square inches the chute opening is compared to the 10-inch inlet, and can't wait to find out just how this thing works. Yeah, these little brackets and latch brackets actually were really well packaged and real easy to mount. Everything lined up perfectly, and they just took a couple of seconds to tighten everything up. Now, when I ordered this unit, I did order something called a diamond liner, which it looks like you can see in there. There's a metal liner that they put in. I looked all over for the bolt for mounting the cover, and finally I found it laying inside that impeller housing there. And then I found out that that is what that extra nut that was laying in the bottom of the box was for. So I guess something must have vibrated loose during shipping and just fell apart. And luckily they stayed together and I found it. And with that cover in place, the only thing left to do was to mount the exhaust. And I really didn't see much in the way of instructions for how it goes together, but you have to remove the bolts that mount the existing exhaust on. And then there was another bracket that I found laying in the bottom of the box that I guess was the gasket that goes in there. So then you just place the gasket in, and then you have to aim the exhaust kind of down and out away from the tractor, and then put the bolts back in and mount it. But I did find out later that I'm having a problem with my tractor actually sucking the exhaust fumes up past the operator. It seems that it's either being caused by the hydrostatic fan or the fact that the Kubota BX tractor has a motor mounted backwards and it pulls all its cooling air over the operator. So I guess over time I'm going to have to find some kind of an extension or some way to get that exhaust out of there so I don't always wind up smelling like exhaust when I'm done using this piece of equipment. I guess most tractors pull the exhaust pull the cooling air from the front of the tractor and would be pushing this exhaust away from you. So this must just be a problem with the Kubota BX. And they did supply a quart of 30 weight oil to be used in the machine, and that's just a simple matter of removing that yellow plug dipstick, and I actually keep an old squirt top to put on the quarts of oil when I use them to make it easier to get them in the little engine, the little holes in the engines. And so it's just a matter of filling that up and just fill it up, and they say until it's just level with the exit of that thread, and it's okay. Funny, I haven't used 30 weight engine or 30 weight oil in a small engine in years, but I guess that's what they recommend. And I guess that in the future I probably will, after it's broken in, switch over to a synthetic oil to hopefully make it last a little bit longer. Then the only other thing to do is just kind of snap on that top elbow and slide the top of it into the bag and get those two catches. I then filled it up with some 93 octane fuel, so now it's all ready to go. The next thing I had to do was to build a hitch for the back of my tractor. So I had an old, one of those old Reese hitch ball adapters laying around, so I started by just cutting the end off of that so I could just use the 2-inch square tubing as a starting point for my hitch mount. It would have been nice if I had a piece of 2x2 tubing laying around, but I didn't, and I really did not feel like buying a length of it just for this short piece, so that old hitch mount became a donor. And as you can see, I just kind of cut that off. Then I went back and I cut halfway through it on the flat, and then I just took it and I took the bandsaw and I notched out that section of it. I set it up so that the hitch height would be at 12, I think it was 12 3/4 inches was the level point on my unit. So I just kind of notched that out, and then I was able to take and put that back in the tractor and just locate the hitch mount that came with the unit. And I went back and I just welded the factory hitch mount onto that piece of 2x2 that I had, and then threw a little bit of spray paint on it and a couple of good heavy duty rubber feet on the two outside corners to keep everything from rattling when it went together. So it's just a matter of using the 2-inch square hitch on the back of my tractor now, and then tightening these heavy duty rubber feet bumpers up a little bit, and basically there's zero rattle in anything when you're done. When I ordered the unit, they said that they did have a 2-inch hitch adapter available, but it would have cost me like an extra $50. So this basically cost me nothing and worked out good. I would have to guess that the tongue weight that this thing adds to the back of your tractor is probably at least 150 pounds when it's empty. Then I went back to the final box, and that was the MDA, they call it, the mower deck adapter. And basically, it comes with no cutouts in it or anything, and it also comes with a hose adapter that goes on it. And then there is also a mounting bracket that comes with it in the same box. Basically, you can see here that there's some chips in the powder coat and damage to the finish in this bracket also. So it's just like every other part of this machine. Now, when I went back and I tried to line up the deck adapter for the first time, I just kind of set it on a block of wood in place and trying to figure out how to use the bracket that they gave me. It turned out I have a problem with my Kubota deck. There's a bracket welded on there for that little flapper that swings up and down and mounts on the deck normally, and none of the brackets were high enough to clear it. So I wound up going back and drawing up some stuff and cutting it out on my plasma table to create my own bracket that would kind of use the existing holes in the existing bracket that was welded on the deck. And I just started by cutting out a flat plate that would mount the mower deck adapter. And then I had to go back and draw up a couple of arms that would this plate would be welded between, and that would allow me to just kind of hang the mower deck adapter off of the existing holes. It's just so great to have the CNC plasma table that I built for when you get into a problem like this and you have to build a quick bracket that you really don't want to spend a lot of time on, and you can just quickly draw it up and do a quick G-code of it, and then it'll only take seconds to cut out the parts. I guess I could have made modifications to the bracketry that they gave me and cut some slots out to clear the other stuff and whatnot, but I guess I just didn't feel that it was worth messing with and having to still drill extra holes in my deck and whatnot. So there you can see what the parts look like, and later I went back and I had to drill a couple of holes in there for the pivot points where it mounts onto the deck, and I just kind of did that in my Bridgeport quick. And here you can see it's just kind of held in place by a couple of screws right now, but here you can see it with it all tacked together how it's going to mount. So then I just went back and I held the mower deck adapter up in place and drilled a couple of holes, and I put a couple extra big washers on the inside too. I may cut another steel plate in the future to stiffen it a little bit, just a thin plate. But for now, it seems to work pretty good. Plus, the good thing about it is I have quite an uneven lawn. And if I do get the mower deck tipped on the edge where the mower deck adapter hits, it actually will be able to swing up slightly out of the way and not damage the adapter. So I think that'll be a good thing in the long run. So pretty much I just got the adapter mounted in place, and then once it was mounted, I went back and I took a Sharpie to mark out the outline of the cutout that I would need for the to make it match the deck. And there you can see the cutout. Then I went back and I drew another line on it, about an 1/8 inch back for the thickness of the deck. And I took a small trim router and bit, and I just carefully use that to follow the lines that I had cut out, and the plastic actually cut really nice and clean with it. I got a couple of burrs on it during the cutting process, but they were really easy to remove later, just kind of using an angle grinder with a sandpaper disc on it. So it was a pretty easy job to do, and it was nice that they did supply the adapter with no cutout, so you could get a nice tight fit by the time that you were done. Now, in the instruction manual, they say to use a jigsaw, but I had really good luck just using that little router, and there you can see it came out a little bit burred up, and then I just went back and took a grinder and I just kind of cleaned off all of the little melted plastic in the burrs. It only took a second, and I did get a really nice fit, and I was able to taper that bottom edge so that it was kind of pointed, so the grass would not hang up on it. Then it was just a matter of throwing a coat of spray paint on my bracket for mounting it, and putting in the 4 mounting bolts, and they also have some nylon lock nuts on them. I just use the ones from the kit, and then it was just a matter of putting it up to the deck and sliding the pin from the old chute on the deck into place. So here's just a quick little video of what it looks like all assembled. There's a hitch bracket, and here's basically everything put together, mounted. It wound up taking me just about a full day by the time I made all the brackets and whatnot. And then you have to trim the hoses to fit also, and just kind of everything went together real nice, and it's time for its maiden use. I will be doing a video in the future about how good it works, but this is just kind of my first time out with it, and I did run into some problems with it. It did a beautiful job on the lawn, but the filter on the bag kept plugging up with about a third of a bag, and oh, what a monster it was to clean. So my next video will contain the information about how we solved that. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.